have two main styles of how we're going to conduct debate. So the first one will be a moderated caucus, which is structured debate. So when you say motion for a moderated caucus, you say how long you want the caucus to be, so let's say 5 minutes, the topic you want it to be on, and how long each person gets to speak. So an example of motioning for moderated caucus would be, I motion for a 5-minute moderated caucus with a 1-minute speaking time on the topic of digital privacy. Unmoderated caucus is a little bit different. It's not structured debate. It's time where you can go talk to somebody, draft resolutions. There is no speaking time. There's just so when you motion for an unmod, you would say, I motion for a 5-minute unmoderated caucus.
The internet has become an integral factor in the UK society, and as such, the UK has made it its vision to make the UK's internet one of the safest in the world. Earlier this year in April, we published our Online Harms White Paper, which detailed an approach to internet regulation to make sure illegal or possibly harmful content is taken down. The UK also believes that it is the responsibility of government, company, and user to cooperate in order to make the internet a safer place than it is now.
We believe that freedom of expression and speech is the most important thing. On the internet, companies and online sources need to regulate what they put out there to make sure there's not harmful or inappropriate content, but at the same time, they need to maintain human rights, freedom of expression, and freedom of speech online.
I believe that we need to enforce the UN Human Rights Framework, which on technology and social media mainly means freedom of speech. I think that we do not expect companies to self-regulate, which is why we need to have a smart mix of government and companies involved in this new emerging frame of media.
Dailymotion believes that the answer to bad speech is not no speech, but rather good speech. We cannot have a free society without the free dissemination of ideas. Our goal is to work with other companies on resolutions and lower the content restrictions with more freedom of speech along with the new restrictions.
Amazon isn't a social media site. It's a place where you can buy some things. Now, having said that, Amazon is not a place where they can sell your information. It's a place where they can use your information to send to other people so they could give the product that you want.
You can post anything on Reddit as long as it follows the Reddit's content of policy. If it violates that, our anti-evil team will take it down.
Did you know that if Facebook was a country, it would be the largest in the world, with over 2 billion users? But also, it would be ruled by an undemocratic and uncaring government. It is imperative that they work to protect human rights.
Users on social media can post anything they want to these delegates have mentioned as long as it is politically correct.
Esteemed delegates and Honorable Chair, as you have seen from Hong Kong, governments cannot always be trusted to protect the human rights of their citizens. Therefore, it is time for the international community, such as the United Nations, to step in and help citizens of the planet, because governments and companies especially cannot always be trusted.
Are there any points or motions on the floor?
Motion for a 10-minute moderated caucus about how tech companies should be able to regulate their own content.
That is in order. All those in favor? Okay, that clearly passes.
The era of self-regulation for online companies is over. Unfortunately, these companies had the chance to take action, but they did not do the job. Therefore, it is the UK's belief that the government does need to interfere at some point and help these companies in updating their privacy policies and taking down illicit content. Otherwise, heavy fines will be coming towards these companies.
Tech companies should be able to decide what material is allowed on their platform with connection to the government, depending on the needs of the people. It should be on a country-to-country basis on what the government wants. We should be able to decide our own content because we are the ones who are actually checking for that content, and we might be able to understand what people want to see and what they do not want to see.
France believes in digital speech, freedom of digital speech, and at the same time censoring certain hate speech and certain things that may harm others.
First, I think the social media platform should have the basis line of regulating. But in extreme cases, the government should be able to come in and take over. And the third component is being the consumer and regulating your own content. If you see something you do not agree with, you can regulate it yourself by not looking at it or responding to it. Although this seems extreme, of course there are still the normal regulations from the social media platform.
Well, the problem is many social media companies are simply too small and don't have the resources to hire people or to make the algorithms that regulate content. And this is where the government does have the resources and does have the power and does have the knowledge to come and help with funding and hiring workers to take down illegal content.
You're giving a ticket to a country that is corrupt, but you're also giving the ticket to a country who is fighting terrorism and who needs to ban things that are influencing terrorism in their country that is killing people daily. So yes, sometimes you do need to give it to countries that are corrupt, but sometimes for the greater good of other countries. Thank you.
Australia believes that there should be one large guideline made by the UN for moderated content. But if companies do continue to permit said content on their websites, then they should be liable for breaking this guideline.
The government should not regulate tech companies and the content because it could be biased.
What is the UN definition of human rights?
Human rights are a very broad category. It includes the Universal Declaration, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That's considered the International Bill of Human Rights, those three documents. It includes everything from the right to family, the right to health, the right to freedom of expression, freedom to manifest and have a religion. It includes a broad range of rights. For this specific area, we're talking about freedom of expression, which comes from Article 19 of the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That says that states that people do have the right to freedom of expression, but it can be limited for lawful purposes to protect rights and reputations of others for public security or public safety. But those limitations have to be narrowly tailored so as to not be over-inclusive. It has to be the least restrictive means possible of achieving a legitimate lawful end.
For 15-minute unmoderated caucus.
All those in favor, please raise your placards now. This motion clearly passes.
Didn't pass it, that doesn't take place in the UN.
We're saying that we're working with
Right now, the agenda is set in fairly simple terms of what is regulated, by what standards and things like that, who does the regulating, and how is it regulated? Is it regulated through law enforcement, through criminal punishments? Is it done by moderators or AI? Of figuring out standards, who should impose and govern those standards, and what accountability actually looks like.
Allowing corporations to solely be judge and jury on content is absurd. The UN has collectively agreed on a specific set of human rights. Establishing an international framework between completely different countries such as China, which is a little bit more oppressive towards free speech, and the US, which allows tons of free speech. This is important. We need to find an international framework, and those should be the sets of rules that corporations use to censor their content.
I believe that each tech company should regulate what's on their own platform because they are the ones that know who their audience is. Facebook has a platform of 2 billion people, bigger than any country. This means that we should cater to those 2 billion people, not to a small percentage of them that is its particular country.
Germany believes that the government knows its people the best. I know there are some countries that where this may not be true, such as China, but I believe we can all benefit from general regulation by the UN.
France is committed to having freedom of speech on digital platforms and thinks that the only thing that should be regulated is hate speech, since it can be extremely offensive and targeted towards minorities.
Everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression, including the freedom to seek, receive, impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers. Right now, as the UN stands, or as the general international consensus stands, international corporations are bound to respect these rights. States have a duty to protect them, which means they have to take affirmative actions. Corporations should just not violate them. And that is some background as you guys start talking more about human rights. There are a lot more human rights in here, some of which might be relevant. If you think they are, I am glad to explain them. If you don't think they are, I will probably still be glad to explain them, but I will spare you that until we get to class and it becomes more relevant. Are there any questions about Article 19?
All those in favor of reopening debate? This passes.
If a post causes someone to go out and hurt someone, that would be objectionable content, only if there is a direct correlation between the post and the action.
And we do not want videos circulating of terrorists shooting weapons, and that will make a statement to our people that the terrorists have more power than the government, which will cause an insurgency. So we believe that censorship should be brought to a next level for some countries that are struggling with things like terrorism and corruption.
Content that is discriminatory to a certain minority or people should be taken down because that can also incite violence.
Equilibrium where we could sell.
We acknowledge.
The child. U.S. didn't pass that. That doesn't.
This is our bill. Our topic is technology. Companies are responsible for the safety and protection of those who use their site. This is also the responsibility of those in government. The governments and technology companies will work in conjunction to create a safer online experience. If the post directly affects public security or safety, so like citizens or government officials are being harassed, abused, or targeted because of an event or how they identify, the platform does have the final say. But if chosen to turn down the request, they have to give a really clear reason on why it was rejected. Citizens are also allowed to report to the companies themselves if they find the content that they believe to be objectionable. We know that this request is already in place, so the request has to have reasonable grounds, and objectionable content could incite violence against certain people or groups, depicts bodily harm, terrorist or criminal gang propaganda, disinformation for malicious purposes, or is deemed harmful by the platform.
This also means that it cannot be anything that is someone's opinion. If it's an opinion, it can stay online unless it's a threat.
If the company does not agree with the terms and they make an appeal to the government, if the government does not think that that clear reasoning is good, company is not allowed in their country, or what would happen then?
If it was like an international incident or something very widespread, because I think a social media platform would see the amount of like damage it's done to a country, so it's very unlikely that that would actually be a real circumstance.
As well as, we'd like to remind delegates that it is the government that is appealing to the companies to take down a certain post, not the other way around.
If a government made an appeal, how long would the companies have to respond to the government about whether they would take down the post or not?
In 2 days.
We will be entertaining 2 for and 2 against speakers. So all those wishing to argue for Resolution 1.0, please raise your placards.
I think this bill will provide a healthy balance of power between the UN, individual governments, and companies. It sets clear regulations which have concerns of many of countries taken into mind. And this bill will allow each party to check and balance each other while catering to the needs of individuals.
This bill does not cover over lawsuits filed by people who have to go through all these posts and delete them one by one, seeing stuff that they shouldn't even be seeing, because this has to be off of the internet, and most of this stuff is illegal, and now you're just showing it to some group of people who get traumatized and then sue the company. Now the company can't do anything because they just point to the UN and say, hey, they made us do it, they're not covering the cost, go sue the UN, and now the UN gets sued. Is that good? No.
Never heard of a situation like that ever happening, of someone whose job is to go through these posts, getting traumatized, and suing the company. I've never heard of that before. Also, this resolution goes with almost everyone's policy in the room because it combines a helpful balance of companies, self-regulation, and the United Nations. So I urge everyone to vote yes on this resolution.
And as a nation who knows this resolution well, the UK believes that everyone should vote yes on this because it is comprehensive, it is clear, and it takes us a step forward towards our common goal, which is making the internet a safer place for everyone.
All those opposed? All those abstain? This resolution clearly passes. Deserves a round of applause.
Okay, so our topic is countries are responsible for their people, and tech companies are responsible for the users using their website or web browser.
Some of the team that's working to take down content that does not match their policies will be human. Most AI cannot figure out what matches and what does not match policies because, as we saw before, a woman posted a picture of her breastfeeding her child that was marked as pornography.
We were worried about what happens to the workers that are suffering from PTSD because of having to look at these things. What will happen with their jobs, and then what will also happen if they still have to look at them because AI can't figure out everything.
While it may be a decent declaration, I think that it should go through an amending process to become more suitable for the world, as they're proposing to get rid of AI to have humans, which they says that this is to make it less biased, but humans already have a natural bias and AI has little to no bias, and companies have already invested great sums of money into this technology. How do you think that they will feel to have it go all into the trash?
The reason for us not using the AI is not because of biases, it's because the technology is not fully functional, and so we don't want to have accidents where we accidentally take things off social media platforms that actually deserve to be there instead of actually it being biased.
One con already noticed in a lot of the other great resolutions and bills that were presented to us is that they kind of skimmed over the appeals process. So this bill could work in conjunction with other bills, but provides more specific appeals process.
Creating a committee that will oversee an appeals process on social media platforms around the world. Social media companies are required to give the users the unlimited ability to argue in favor of putting their censored content back up on the site. Technology companies have the last say in what is on their platform, as it is outlined in their terms of service and it is their platform. If the committee feels that social media platforms are being untruthful about their appeals process, they have the right to appeal to the UN. Social media platforms will be required to respond to any user appeals within 1 month of their post, and users can have this ability limited to once a month if they abuse it. The UN will not provide funding to companies who hire these workers, as it is their responsibility to keep unsatisfactory posts off their site.
Does this bill make it so corporations have complete say in whether things get taken down?
This bill does not touch on that matter. It works in conjunction with other bills that we might have already passed or will pass.
However, if the committee feels that the company is not being truthful about their appeals processes, then
They can investigate.
obviously they can investigate.
This resolution will skip the pro-cons. We'll introduce the second resolution, and then we'll have about 5 minutes of debate on either resolution by the committee. Then we'll do pro-con to decide if you're ready to move into voting block or not. So all sponsors to this resolution that has just been introduced, please come forward.
So $750,000 is more than enough for an artificial intelligence program because average startups for AI cost around $100,000 to $150,000 and possibly more if we can allocate more. And to ensure transparency, they will provide the algorithm for the artificial intelligence and provide why the content was taken down. On the subject of the AI bill, in which it stated that $750,000 would be allocated to an artificial intelligence program. The wording is unclear about exactly where this money is going.
If $750,000 gets donated to a program and they complete this AI thing, and then will every single company be required to use it?
It's not that much of each company is required to use artificial intelligence, but it's benefiting the employees of the company, and it's a more efficient strategy and way to get things done.
A huge misunderstanding with what the $750,000 is actually allocated to. When a social media company is emerging, they're likely going to start very small, and it's very hard to develop artificial intelligence so they're secure. This $750,000 is allocated to a system where we can create a basis of an AI standard around the world that is open source and available to companies to progress it as a whole. As a whole, this resolution will help the world as it's really a win-win long term, because it's not only progressing the economy, it is making sure that companies will make sure that their data is secure and that the companies can be better.
Delegate speaking on the pro side said it would help the economy if we gave them money, but what would help the economy more is if they took out loans from banks, which would actually help the economy of that country. So this $750,000 idea, it just doesn't work out.
In favor of artificial intelligence bill, please raise your placards now. This bill fails. We will now move on to the next bill. I believe it is Resolution 2. All those for this resolution, please raise your placards now. All those against? All those abstaining? With a vote for 7 for, 18 against, and 8 abstaining, this resolution fails. Are there any points or motions on the floor? Yes, delegate from Senegal.
Motion to close debate.
That is in order. All those in favor?
Never.
This motion clearly passes.